And now Ty Anderson in studio with us as well. Ty, big day yesterday for your Bees.
I know. It was weird. They actually had money for the first time in like 3 years. It's like they were like, and I thought what was great about it, honestly, was like they identified two guys right away, and they're like, we're getting them. And I love that strategy so much more than like, all right, well, we didn't get our guys, but we want to be on the fun. Let's just go sign 4 guys that we don't actually need or want. Like, I go back to 2021. They had 30-something million in cap space, and the only guy they brought in that was like, oh, wow, like legit game changer was Linus Ullmark. They signed Eric Haula. They signed Tomas Nosek. They signed Nick Foligno. They signed Derek Forbort, and you're just kind of like, all right, I guess. And then you look up, and like $14 million off the board. Like, so this was good in the sense that they targeted 2 areas of need for them, and they got the guys they wanted. And so it's a good free agency in that regard. I would give it a B. Not an A, because free agency is always tough. You're buying in on guys at 29 years old, and when you give them term, you're basically saying, yeah, the second half or the final third of this contract is going to look kind of rough, but if we win in 4 years, nobody cares.
So when you look at both of these signings, I think the one with Lindholm we've talked already about, right? I mean, when you've been in here, we've talked about the possibility of Lindholm landing here for months now. And now it's happened. I think the term kind of sucks if you don't win, and it's a huge commitment. And the only thing I will say about the day is to spend $84 million, commit $84 million in free agency to 2 guys. Is one of these guys going to change the franchise in a major way?
So when it comes to Lindholm, the Bruins feel that if they put high-end talent around him, he can go back to being a point-per-game player like he was in Calgary when he had Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk on his wings. They have David Pastrnak. Pastrnak had an input on this, that, hey, I think this would be a good fit, this would work, and the Bruins want to reward Pastrnak. I think that when you look at Lindholm, right, like it's not just the two-way game and winning faceoffs, being a right-handed centerman, it's what he can do in the power play. You put him on the power play, you put him in that bumper, that Bergeron spot, he is now your second best weapon on that power play. The power play was way too predictable a year ago because teams could simply key in on David Pastrnak, kind of like how teams would key in on Alexander Ovechkin during Ovechkin's prime, where they would say, just shadow him, just put 2 guys on him. I don't care. No one else is on this power play is going to beat us.
Yeah.
And so I think that's sort of where they're looking. They're looking at the trickle-about effect where you have Lindholm on this roster. You have him at center, and what that does is that slots Pavel Zacha back to the wing, where he's a better scorer, better player, plays with more confidence. That slots Charlie Coyle down, so he's not a top-line center. He can go back to feasting on second and third pairings, and it just allows you to sort of not worry about that position as much as you were a year ago, where you're like, well, we hope this works. Like, you have more certainty now with your forward grouping and your power play than you did on June 30th, and that was the most important thing for the Bruins.
The question I would have for you is this. On Ty Anderson's power rankings, where would you slot the Bruins at now? The first part. And the second part is, if these guys were here last year against Florida, what would it look like?
So I think that it wouldn't be a total domination at center like it was the final 3 games where you had nobody who could match up against Barkov. I don't think that Lindholm bridges the gap between you and the Panthers. But at the same time, Cerrone, I don't think you were bridging the gap between yourselves and the Panthers, no matter what you did. Like, when you build a team through free agency in any sport, like, it's hard to be like, okay, we were, let's say the 5th best team. Now we're the 1st. Like, especially in the NFL and baseball and hockey, like, it's just the rosters are too deep. Players who draft and develop their superstars like the Panthers have for the most part, like, when those guys are locked in, it's like you got to hope that you can just chip away at it year after year after year. And so I think the power rankings, like, I think they're the second best team in their division. I would say overall they're probably around where they were a year ago, the 4th best team in the Eastern Conference. So much of that comes back to their goaltending, their D-zone. Like, when you have McAvoy, Carlo, Lindholm, who they think can be better next year, Mason Lohrei, like, you got a big defense that is kind of in the model with the NHL and where it's trending. And then you look at sort of the playoffs, right, guys? Like, they gave Florida the best fight. I would say up until the final 4 games of Florida's playoff run, you were looking at the Bruins going, that team gave them the best run for their money out of everybody they faced. So You got so I think they're there. They're not quite at the same level, but I still think they are their biggest threat to beat them in a playoff series. I think when you look at Tampa, I like the moves that Tampa made, but you're losing Steven Stamkos, you're bringing in Jake Gensel, you're losing Mikhail Sergachev. It's a lot of established power going out the door there at key positions, right? Top 6 center and your team captain and your top pairing D. Florida lost a couple of defensemen, didn't replace them. Brandon Montour's gone there. Ekman Larsson's gone. Toronto is still Toronto. Goaltending is the biggest question, so I think the Bruins are still the second best team in their division, but it's closer. It's closer than it was this past year, I would say.